Hey, what's up everyone? April Dunham here. Happy New Year! For my first video of the new year here, I thought I would start with a beginner video on SharePoint. SharePoint's one of those tools that's been around for years, so I think we sometimes often forget that there's people that are brand new to it every day that need to know the basics. So I thought I'd do a quick video walking you through all of the basics and what you need to know about SharePoint as an end user. I'll walk you through what SharePoint is, some of its features, and of course we'll do a live demo and walk through how you can start using it. All of that and more coming up. So what is SharePoint exactly? At the most simple level, it's a web-based collaboration tool. It's going to give you a place that you can securely share information with your company, a content management system, and a workflow collaboration tool all in one platform. There are a few key components of SharePoint that you need to know about as an end user. First, we have sites to organize content. So, for example, if you're using SharePoint in your organization, you might have a site for HR and IT and marketing, and they store information within each of their individual sites. So it's just kind of like a logical boundary for information. Then, within those sites, we can have things called pages to surface up information. So just think of these as pages that you would have on a normal website. So you might have different information on an About page versus a Contact Us page. Then within those pages, we can have things called web parts to display content on the pages. So these are just widgets like you might add, again, to a website to surface up different information. Next, we have these powerful things called libraries. They allow us to have document storage within SharePoint so we can save our Word documents, PowerPoint, Excel, PDFs, images, videos, you name it. And finally, we have lists for database type data storage. How I like to describe list is take anything that you would traditionally maybe store in an Excel table or Access database, then that would be a good use case for a list. So rather than having files like a library does, you would have data stored within a list. And if you keep up with Microsoft news, you might have heard a lot of talk about something called Microsoft List. Well, all Microsoft List is a subset of the functionality that SharePoint already offers, which is the SharePoint List. So it's really the same thing as SharePoint List, just rebranded, and you're given an application to manage all of your lists across all of the different sites. Now let's talk about some use cases for SharePoint. SharePoint's commonly used as what's called an intranet. So if you've heard that term intranet thrown around, what we mean here is a place that serves as an informational hub for a given organization. So you know we have the internet, which is where we go to get on our social media applications and all of those publicly accessible sites. But the intranet, on the other hand, is behind the firewall and locked down just to authenticated users within a certain organization. So that's where SharePoint's commonly used. You'll see a lot of businesses using it as their one-stop shop to get information out to their employees, to share documents, and all of that. Another use case for SharePoint that you might not be aware of is it's actually powering Microsoft Teams. So if you've used Microsoft Teams, little did you know you're actually also using SharePoint. Each time that you create a new team in Microsoft Teams, a SharePoint site is provisioned in the backend, and that's what's actually used for the document storage and sharing mechanism that Teams offers. So just a hidden SharePoint fact for you all there. All right, now that I've given you a rundown of some of the basics about SharePoint, let's jump over to the demo and see how this works in action. Before I jump into the demo here, I first need to explain the different types or versions of SharePoint there are. SharePoint comes in two flavors. There's a version of SharePoint that you can install on physical servers that you may have heard be referred to as on-premises. That was the original way that SharePoint first came out. So there's versions of SharePoint that you can install on a physical server, starting all the way back from a 2003 version to the most recent 2019. The one that I'm going to be focusing on and showing you demos of is the Microsoft 365 version of SharePoint, also known as SharePoint Online. There are several plans for Microsoft 365 that include SharePoint. So just taking a look at the site here, we can see that from everything from Business Basic that starts at just $5 a month, all the way up to Business Premium, and also what we call the E SKUs or the enterprise level SKUs will include SharePoint. So to get to SharePoint, you'll log into your Microsoft 365 portal. then we'll see the SharePoint icon here to launch the SharePoint portal. When you click that SharePoint button, you're going to be taken to the SharePoint landing page. This is a curated list of SharePoint sites that you frequently visit, your most recently visited ones, and also news that is surfaced up from different SharePoint sites. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, sites are kind of how you structure and organize data. So we might have different sites for various departments or projects we're working on or whatever it might be. So as you see here in my list of frequent sites, I've been to the HR site, an IT site, and a training site. To see an example of what a site looks like, let's go into this landing site. When I click that link, it's opening up this site called the landing. And the first thing we see here is an example of what a page looks like in SharePoint. On this one, you see we have a bunch of different information. We have a slider. We're showing a countdown, the weather, the times for different locations, some news articles, even some embedded videos, some documents, and some links. So this is all on one page, and the content that we're seeing on this page are web parts. So if I click Edit, I can actually take this page and put it in a mode where I can configure what shows on it. So let's click on this slider here and click the pencil. This takes us to the edit configuration for this news web part. So I can see it's pulling up news from the current site that I'm on in a carousel type fashion. And we have all of these settings that we can configure, like the number of news posts to show and the seconds between each change of the news post. We can add new web parts to a page by clicking on this plus button. This opens the web part panel, and we can see all of the different web parts that we have baked into SharePoint that we can use. So we can have image galleries and file viewers, even organization charts. And we can just hard code some text on the page by, say, selecting this text web part. That gives us a blank freeform text widget that we can type into. And each of these web parts have different settings that you can configure for them. Those will show up here on the right-hand side. Then when you're done, just republish, and now you've customized your SharePoint page. The other thing you may have noticed if we click the new button is we have the ability to create a list or a document library. So those are the other big pieces of functionality that SharePoint offers that we went over. And we talked about document libraries being a repository for us to upload documents to. So let's walk through what those look like and how we create one. So we'll select the document library from here, and now we can create a brand new document library, and all we have to do to start out is give it a name. So maybe I'm wanting a document library that will hold some proposals. So I'll give it a name of proposals and click create. And what we'll get here is a blank document library that's ready to use. So to get a feel for how it works, let's click the upload button here, and we'll upload some files. This will take you to your browse menu where we can go and look at our hard drive here and select a file that we want to upload. And you see how fast that was? It uploaded that to our SharePoint site. So now our document is backed up in the cloud in our secured SharePoint site. Now there's a rich security model that could be a whole other video in its own to talk about the ins and outs of how security works in SharePoint. But at a high level, all you need to know is each individual SharePoint site that you go to can have its own unique permissions, and every library and list that you create within a given site can have unique permissions as well, even all the way down to the individual file. So if I had 10 different files in this library and I wanted some people to be able to see this one but not the others, I can control permissions at the file level if I need to as well. So one way to upload is clicking the Upload and Files option, but you can also drag and drop. So I have my Explorer up here on the screen now, so I can take, say, all of these files here, and I can just click, hold, and drag and drop them onto the SharePoint page, and they'll be uploaded all at the same time there. So that's a great way to upload multiple files at once. And you'll notice when we upload these that we have a few columns that are automatically added for us. So it's automatically tracking who uploaded this file and when in these columns. So we have some nice built-in tracking going on. And we can click on any one of these files and it opens up within the browser so we can see and click through and look at all the different documents that we have uploaded here. Now that's an example of a document library, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's a place in the cloud, secured, that you can upload documents. Now let's talk about lists. So if we click the new button here and select list, this is going to take us to the create a list screen. Now list, on the other hand, you're not going to store files in them, but you're going to use those to store data. List in SharePoint recently got a big makeover, which is what I was talking about with the whole Microsoft list. So when you click the new list option here in SharePoint, you see that we can either create a blank list. We even have the ability to create a list from an Excel spreadsheet. So as I said earlier, anything that you might be storing in Excel workbooks right now could be replaced with a SharePoint list. And to make that easy to update those to SharePoint list, they offer you the ability to take an Excel file and it will automatically read what columns you have in that file, create a SharePoint list based off of that, and it can even import your data. Pretty cool. There's also the option to create a new list from an existing list. So if you built out several lists in SharePoint, and you want to duplicate all of the metadata and columns that you have in that and another list, you can start from that existing list and it will basically make a copy of that for you. And then the new thing that we have here as part of the Microsoft list rollout are these list templates. So if, say, you're wanting a list to track different assets or inventory items, we could choose this Asset Manager list template. So for tracking assets, we might need to track a tag, maybe a photo of the device, the status, whether it's in use or available, the manufacturer, the model, serial number, all of that. So those are the typical things that you would expect. So what this template's going to do is automatically create a new list with all of this metadata and columns already configured for you. So let's just walk through this first. So I'm going to select Use Template here. And again, we'll give it a name and a description. So it's going to automatically populate a name for us of Asset Manager. We can change that if we need to. Now let's just click Create and we'll take a look at what a list looks like. So this looks fairly similar to that document library we just looked at. But instead of having an upload button and uploading a document, we see a new button here. And when we click that new button, we have a form that's opened up on the right-hand side that has all of this information for us to fill out. So these SharePoint lists, as you can see, are really powerful. It is kind of like a lightweight quasi-database and a form input control baked into one product. So the list itself is kind of like a lightweight database to store the data, and along with that, you get a input form to fill in the data to populate the database. So I click this, and I can click on any of these and start typing in data. And you see we have some text boxes that I just filled in, but if we click the drop down, we can also have choice fields in these forms. So for manufacturer, that was a choice. Asset type is also a choice field, so I can select laptop there, and color as well. And we also have date pickers that we can choose. So I can click on this calendar. It's going to open up a date picker control so I can easily select a date. So if I click save here, this is going to write out all of this information to my SharePoint list. So you'll see that pop up here. So there you go. So now I have a device photo, and then all that information that I filled out is populated here in my SharePoint list. So all of this stuff that you're seeing here, the asset tag, status, manufacturer, these are called columns, or also known as metadata. They're just fields that we add to our list and to our libraries so that we can tag the data within it and easily search, filter, and sort the data within our list and libraries. We can add new columns by clicking the Add Column button here. And then we'll get a drop down of all of the different column types that we have to choose from. So we have single or multi-line of text. We can do numbers, booleans, yes, nos, date, time, choice, hyperlink, currency, images. And if we click more, we have a few more options that we can use to create columns. A couple that I want to highlight here that show up on this section are the lookup and calculated columns. I'll start with lookup columns. That's a special column type for SharePoint lists and libraries. If you come from a database background or know a bit about databases, it's kind of like a way to create a foreign key in your table. So let's look at an example here. So in this particular template, we have this manufacturer column, and we just configured it as a choice field, and we manually entered in some options here for Microsoft, Contoso, Tray Research, and Fabricam. And this is fine and a great way to surface up drop-down information if you have just a few items there. But what if you have a list of, say, 100 or more different manufacturers that you needed to choose from? That would be pretty tedious to go in and add all of those here in as choices. But what would be easier is to maybe use that import from Excel option and add in those list of manufacturers in another SharePoint list. But then if you do it that way, how do we have a field for manufacturer that could pull from those values so that we can tag our assets with a manufacturer? Well, we can do that with a lookup field. To demo this out better, let's actually create a manufacturer list. So we'll go to New and List. And this will be a great use case to demonstrate creating a list from Excel. So what I'm going to do is we'll create a new Excel spreadsheet, and we'll just build out a very simple spreadsheet here. So I'll create a header called name, and then maybe we'll want to track, say, the city, state, zip, and address of the manufacturer, and maybe email. So that's the data we want to track, and I'll just fill this out with some information here. So we'll save this to our hard drive here, and I'll come in here and I'm going to highlight our data. Then we're going to select the Format as a Table option. Select any one of these you want, confirm the selection there, and we'll have that formatted as a table so that when we import it, it knows where our column headers are and our data is. Okay, so we have this saved. Now let's close out of that. So now back here in SharePoint, when we created that Create New List button, let's do the From Excel option now. And what we'll do is we'll upload a file and we'll point it to that list of manufacturers that we just created. And you see how easy it is. It's recognizing the different tables that we have in our Excel spreadsheet. And it was able to tell what our column headers were. So we had name, city, state, zip, address, and email. And it's smart enough to identify and map which column types you should create for the data. So for city and state, it's recommending a single line of text field. For the zip, it's recommending a number field type, and then a single line of text for address and email. Now, of course, we can click and override these if we want, but I'm going to leave that as is because that looks good to me. Now all we have to do is click Next, and we will give this a much better name, so we'll remove that long GUID there. And voila, we have a brand new SharePoint list called Manufacturers with all of our columns from the Excel spreadsheet and the data populated. Pretty cool. Now, back to the example I was talking about. Let's go back to our Asset Manager list and see how we can create a drop-down that would pull from that list rather than the hard-coded values. So we'll go back to this Add Column button and go to the More option because the Lookup field doesn't show here as an option. You have to click More. So we'll give this column a name. I'll just call this Manufacturer Lookup, and we'll select the Lookup type. Now, if we scroll down a bit under this Additional Column Settings, in this Get Information From, that's where you're going to tell it which SharePoint list do you want to pull the values from. So it's a drop down. Let's click that and we'll select our manufacturers list. Then we have to select which column we want to pull data from. So we just need the manufacturer name and we map that to the title column. So I'm going to leave that as title, and that's really all we have to do. So I'm going to scroll down, click OK. And now if we click the New button to add another asset into this list and scroll down a bit, now you see we have this new Manufacturer Lookup option. If we click that, it's a drop down that has all of our values from that SharePoint list. The other extra column type I wanted to point out, if we click the Add Column again and go back to More, is the Calculated Column. This is a special type of column that lets you do Excel type formulas in your SharePoint list. So for example, I'm going to call this column Past Due, and down below in the Additional Column Settings, we have a text box that says Formula. So what we can do here is build out Excel type formulas to have calculated information. So for example, maybe I want in this Past Due column an easy visual to say if the due date is less than or equal to today, make this Past Due column say Past Due. Otherwise, say there's still time. Okay, so pretty simple use case. We can write a formula in here, so we can put in an equal sign, and we can put in an if. So if we do an if in an open parenthesis, now I can pull in data from the columns in this list. So I can say if due date, so I can just double click this. Then we'll say less than, equal, and there's a shortcut we can use. We can just type in today with a capital T and open and close parenthesis. So that will actually tell if the due date is less than or equal to today. Then we can do a comma. And then in quotes, I'll just type past due, exclamation. Then we'll do another comma, and in quotes, I'll say still time. And I'll close out those quotes and close out the parentheses. So that's just a very simple formula. Now let's click OK and see if this works. Now I didn't put a due date on this item, so let's fill out one and see if our calculated column works. So how to edit an existing item in your SharePoint list, you can click these three dots and select the Edit button. So it's going to pop open that same input form. So let's fill out a due date, and I'll do it for a while in the past here. So I'll say December 1st and click Save. And there you go. You see the column is saying past due. Now let's just test this out and make sure it's actually working. So I'm going to click the New button again. We'll add a brand new asset into here, and we'll put a due date of February 1st for that and click Save. And if we scroll over, we see that that is not less than or equal to today, so there is still time. So lots of different use cases for these calculated columns, but this is just a very simple one. You can do things like obviously math logic, you can do date comparisons like I showed. Pretty powerful piece of functionality that SharePoint offers here. And those are the two most complicated types of columns in SharePoint. All the other ones are very simple. So if you just need a number column, for example, you would select the number type here, and you can configure all of those settings with this more up-to-date form here. So we can just give it a name. So maybe we'll have purchase price, and then we can configure some additional settings here and click Save. So it's that easy, and it shows up there. Now, another important thing to know about these SharePoint lists and libraries is how to work with the data within them. So each of these columns that we have here, you see there are drop-downs next to them. So if we click on the drop-down here, say next to manufacturer, for each of these columns, we have the ability to sort either ascending or descending. So I can easily sort the information how I need to see it. And you can tell if you have sorting applied to a particular column because you'll see an up or down arrow next to it. We also have the ability to filter. So if we click this filter by option, it's going to open up a panel on the right-hand side, and it's going to show a list of options. So it's going to take whatever data you have in here, and it's going to get all of the data in which manufacturer it was tagged with so that you can filter by it. So for example, I only have an empty one or one that's tagged with Microsoft. So if I only want to see the Microsoft ones, I can select Microsoft from here, apply, and that filters a list for me. And again, I can tell that I have a filter on a column because the little filter icon shows next to the column name. We also have the ability to group by. So before I do that, let's show how to clear out a filter. So this filter is applied right now, but if I click on the filter by again, I can just go to clear all and apply, and that removes my filter. Now for the group by, let's do the asset type for this one. So we'll go to asset type and group by asset type. And as soon as we do that, it's going to give us a header here. So it's going to say asset type laptop, and it's going to give you a count. So if you quickly want to see how many assets you have that are tagged as laptops, this is a great way to do that. It's going to group that, and we can collapse and condense these to see a quick summary of that information. And finally, we can do totals. So if we click on the totals button here under the drop down, you see for the model number, for example, we can do a count. Now we have grouping applied. So in this case, it'll show us a count of how many items are in this current group and the total items in the list itself. So this can come in handy when you have a lot of information in a list and you quickly want to see how many items are in there. For the totals, the options that show differ based off the type of column that it is. So for this purchase price column, that's actually a number type of column. With that, if we go to totals, we have several more options here. So in addition to count, we could do a sum. So if you want to see the sum of all purchase price for all of your assets, you could do that here. This leads me to another trick to show you. If I have several items in here and I want to edit the data more easily rather than having to click and select edit and all of that, we have this option to edit in grid view. This is going to turn our SharePoint list into almost an Excel-like interface. So now I can interact with each of these columns and easily fill out information here. So you can see I can click in the status, the drop-down appears, and it's a much faster and easier way to tag the information that I have in here. All right, so let's fill out purchase price. And now that we have that information, let's exit grid view. So that's how we get out of this type of view here. Automatically saves that for us. And now we can see it did a sum of the purchase price column for us. Now, everything that I just showed you here with this list, with all the columns that we added, the sum, the filter, the sorting, the group, all of that can also be done on the libraries you create. So we created earlier this proposals library. If we go back to that, we have the ability to create columns here so that we can tag these documents with additional metadata. So I can say select a choice column, and maybe I want to tag this proposal with the customer that it's for. So I can create a choice column called customer and fill in some options. Click save, and now that shows up here, and I could easily tag information. If I wanted to quickly tag all of these documents that you see here with a particular customer, we can do that thanks to the bulk property editing that SharePoint gives us. So if we hover over here on the name column, you'll see in the left-hand side a circle with a checkbox. So if I click that, that's going to select all of the documents that I have in this library. Now I can mass edit the metadata of these documents by clicking the Properties tab right here. So the only column that I created right now is Customers. That's the only one it's giving me as an option. But now I can select that dropdown, and I can tag all of these, say as Contoso, and click Save, and it applies that metadata to all of these documents now. Okay, so I just have a couple more things that I want to point out and show you. For the rest of this, I'm going to go back to that list that we were working on. So I showed you if you click on one of these columns, you can filter by that particular column. But if you look on the upper right-hand side, we have a filter icon that we can click. And this is a great way to filter by multiple different columns at once. So if I wanted to, for example, filter by status of reserved and maybe manufacturer Microsoft, I can apply multiple filters at once and see that change in real time. And then we can select the icon again to clear out all of our filters. The next thing I wanted to point out here is this all items icon that we're seeing here with the dropdown. This is an example of what's called a view in your SharePoint list and libraries. A view is just a pre-configured window into the data in a given list or library. When you create a SharePoint list, you're automatically given one view called all items, but we have the ability to create multiple different views. So for example, we created this asset manager based off of a template. That template gave us a bunch of different views pre-configured to choose from. So if I wanted to say group this by manufacturer, that was already made as a view. So all I have to do is click on this dropdown, select group by manufacturer, and it will show me this list with that grouping automatically applied. We can create new views by clicking on that dropdown and selecting Create New View. So we'll create a view called My Assets, then click Create. Now we can make changes to this. So as you see here, we have a field called Current Owner. So if I wanted to make this My Assets view only show items that the current owner is tagged as myself, I can click on the Current Owner column and go to Filter By, select my name, and click Apply. All right, that's all that I have for you all today. I hope if you're new to SharePoint, this has given you a good introduction. I've been using SharePoint for years, and it's a great tool with lots of features and functionality to offer. If you like these introduction videos, please drop a note in the comments and let me know. And as always, if you did find this helpful, I'd really appreciate you liking, hitting that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next video.